Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics, and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 279 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Colin Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can birth trauma impact mothers? And it is Thursday, the 18th of July 2024, as I record this. So, whilst today's episode might seem a little dark and something that we normally don't cover on the podcast, because I'm not a woman, I can't get pregnant, and so sometimes I feel like this is a topic I don't feel like I can talk about, but I've seen there's a lot of research being done on this topic. This is a major issue for women, and this is a very stigmatized topic, so women feel like they can't talk about it. So whilst I cannot give any personal experience, whilst I cannot go that much in depth in it from that point of view, I can still talk about the research, I can still talk about what I've read, and I think that even if we start talking about this, then hopefully this will help lessen the stigma, and women who are experiencing this can feel like they can talk about it. This is a very unsettling topic, but it's also quite an interesting topic. Simply because society basically makes us have a gag order whenever it comes to a birth trauma. So even though we don't talk about any graphic details whatsoever, this is still a really good podcast episode that you're going to learn a lot from. I know that I did. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is, do we prefer preventing mistakes or fixing them? Our everyday lives are filled with situations in which good behaviour is rewarded and bad behaviour punished. There is always scope for mistake, though even in the justice system, some innocent people are unjustly punished. These are termed false positives, while some genuine criminals walk free, false negatives. So which type of mistake do we find less tolerable? Creating false negatives or creating false positives? A series of studies in psychological science by Tandy Rood and Franklin Shabby find some consistent biases in attitudes towards this question. The answer they find is a nuance, as the authors put it, open quote, people maintain stronger preferences for fixing false positive punishments than for preventing them, and stronger preferences for fixing false negative rewards than for preventing them. The overall effect is the endorsement of harsher policies in principle before errors occur, when people focus more on preventing mistakes that help bad actors than in practice after errors occur, when people focus relatively more on fixing mistakes than harm good actors. Close quote. So I think this is a really good forensic psychology article here, because this helps to explain something that I've never understood there, because we have the research and it's a well-known fact, maybe not so much amongst lay people in my experience, but amongst people who actually study forensic psychology and people who are interested in forensic psychology, because come on, I think I bang on about it like enough, especially if you bring up prison sentences in front of me. Thankfully, none of my friends find that a problem, but basically, whenever prison sentences are mentioned, I always manage to slide in the fact that research shows rehabilitation actually helps decrease reoffending instead of longer prison sentences, because Longer pregnancies, they don't work. But it's very interesting to actually look at why do people still adamantly believe that longer prison sentences do help lower the offending, and it all comes back to this idea of punishment that well, because if someone's made like a criminal mistake, then a society wants to punish that person. So having that person spend longer in prison, even if it doesn't actually help decrease a criminal activity as a whole across the population, people still prefer it because it's about punishment. So I think this is a very good take on it, and I think that it's always interesting to look at why the harsher policies are popular amongst the electorate. It's a really good article. So the next one is immune changes in depression may be broader than we thought. The idea that immune changes are linked to major depression disorder has been discussed for many years now. In fact, there's compelling, I say in air quotes, evidence for this by the authors of a recent paper in Translational Psychiatry. However, the work suggests that the nature of the immune changes in major depression disorder have not been fully appreciated, with possible implications both for diagnosis and treatment. Most research to date on altered immune function in people with depression has focused in raised blood levels of one particular marker of inflammation, C-reactive protein. Recent research suggests that raised C-reactive protein is a marker for depression, even when a suite of other variables, including age, sex, BMI, smoking, and exposure to childhood trauma, are taken into account. This has led to the argument that raised C-reactive protein should be considered a core biological feature of depression. However, raised level of several other biomarkers of inflammation have been identified in patients with depression, and other studies have found differences in the expression of a variety of genes linked between patients and healthy people. This work has inspired Luca Frisua at King College London and colleagues to run what they believe is the first study to analyse the expression of known immune-related genes in people with a diagnosis of major depression disorder and with varying levels of blood C-reactive protein and compare them with healthy controls. Biologically minded readers can get the full scoop on the BPS Research Digest website. Okay then, so there are a few reasons why I laughed in this news article. First of all, as you guys know, I'm flat out against the biomedical model. It's so dated. I hate it. Oh my god. And I think this is just sort of like, we all know we need to move towards a more holistic approach, which is what I quite like, the biopsychosocial model, even though I've recently been informed that the new joke is that's actually called the bio model, simply because if you look at it in the workplace and in healthcare settings, the biological functions still actually take up all of it. So people might write down the biological, psychological, and social factors, but the biological factors still get the priority, which is rubbish in my opinion. Like, we need to. Depression is psychological mostly, especially after Moncrief and Reed 2022. Yes, I will recommend that paper till the day I die. It's amazing. Has basically criticised and basically annihilated the biological argument for depression, especially when it comes to treatment. So, my issue with this study is that, yes, we might have this research, but this just feels like we're reinforcing the biomedical model, and this is very reductionist because, okay, then, okay, then, if this is a reliable marker of depression, then when it comes to treatment, Then what do? Do we yet again only focus on the biomedical interventions, which, as we know from tons of research over the years, including one from 2022, that the antidepressants and the other biomedical interventions for depression, they don't work and they're not as effective as psychological treatment. So if we take this inflammation argument, does this reinforce the biomedical model? Yes, it does. Yeah, and I just think that oh, this paper's just really irritated me because we should be focusing on one, a more holistic approach, two, I just don't want this to become a situation of medical doctors getting really excited about this inflammation argument. So yet again, we're moving back to the biomedical model instead of recognizing the psychological aspects. Because yes, we could focus on the inflammation angle, but how do we address the biased cognitive processes and all the psychological coping mechanisms which are maladaptive for the client? As you can tell, I'm quite irritated by this. I'm quite passionate, and oh my god, yeah, yes, I like biomedical research, but it's just irritating at times. Okay, so rant over. And the last one is, should we generate psychological hypotheses with AI? No, is what I'm going to say, but let's read the article. A new paper published in Humanities and Social Science Communications details a technological new approach to the labour-intensive process of coming up with psychological theories. Leave it to AI. In this study, a team fed over 43,000 psychology papers into a large language model and asked it to look for relationships between variables on a massive scale. After those analyses, they looked more closely at 130 potential hypotheses generated by AI, all of which focused on well-being. In terms of novelty, these hypotheses were compared to those crafted by doctorate students. They also drew from a wide range of ideas and seemed to be equally useful to theories penned by humans, though whether or not the generated hypotheses are correct would of course require further investigation. Before we all get excited by the capabilities of ChatGPT, there are some limitations to consider. As the authors note, some of the links identified by the AI did not align with human expectations, suggesting that a robotic eye might service some implausible links that humans would more readily dismiss, given their intuitive understanding of behavior. The authors believe that this approach has the potential to revolutionize the way psychological researchers draw insight from extended literature. It's already been put to good use in physics, but whether the approach will be taken up by psychologists is an open question. We're curious about what you would think of this, dear readers, and to be honest, so am I. Definitely contact me. I want to know your thoughts. Do you think that psychological researchers should embrace AI-powered hypothesis generation? Okay, now this is quite an interesting one because I know about artificial intelligence from the author space and how these large language models are basically being trained on illegal data. Because they're because all these AI companies are basically stealing copyrighted work, which is illegal, to train these models, and they're not paying the authors and the artists, which is why I'm flat out against it, because I'm pretty sure some of my books have been used, and I'm not getting paid for it. But to take a more balanced approach, I think the idea of a robotic eye looking for links between extended data could be very useful, because psychologists could dismiss stuff because we believe and because of our own biases towards how human behavior works. because our own self-knowledge isn't brilliant, and also we can be dismissive, like I've definitely been dismissive before. And I also think that the idea that AI could be used to analyze extensive literature, that actually could be flat out critical. Because I mean, it's so boring going through 1,000 papers like I did for my gamification of autism literature review, and I've no doubt that I missed stuff because it was just so many papers. And also that 1,000 papers, what if there were more? What if there were other papers that I didn't include in that search? So I definitely think there's a place for it. I don't want this to become a crutch for the discipline. I don't want AI. I don't want psychological researchers to go, oh, creating a hypothesis by myself is too hard. Let me use this AI tool to do it for me. I don't want the profession to get lazy, and I don't think we're going to, because I've done some research studies now. I've been talking to lots of academics this past year, and there's always that innate curiosity when it comes to psychology research, and that's what makes it so much fun. Fun there because we're curious. We want to understand how certain things work. So I think that the idea that AI could ever replace human generated hypothesis, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it could help us. I think that there might be a place for it, depending on the researcher. But I don't know. I think it's a tough one. I would love to know your thoughts. Definitely get in touch with me. So that's enough for the slightly extended psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. So this week has been really busy, and the reason why I'm recording this early is because there's basically no other time I can actually record the podcast. Because I've been out with friends. I've been helping my best friend finish cleaning up their house, just so they can get their deposit back, or their tenancy ends in a few days. So that's taken up a lot of my time. I've seen two different friends. This afternoon I'm actually going to a barbecue with some people that I did student ambassador work with. So that's going to be a lot of fun. My friend made chili, and I made a Swedish princess torta, simply because we were both sitting there the other night, and we were like, well, we should do some cooking. We should take something. And then I turned around and said, well, why don't we cook stuff for ourselves that we would never actually cook normally? Basically, use the barbecue as an excuse. So even if the other people don't like the stuff, we actually still get something out of it. So we did that quite late last night because we were just so busy. And then tomorrow, me and my best friend we're going down to Brighton because we're going to a Pride event on Saturday. And then one of our friends is coming up with us, so that they're going to be staying for a few days, next week. So busy times. It's a lot of fun. I'm still doing lots of writing, lots of other really fun projects, which I'm really excited about. So as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment out of the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, or you can tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn. And today's episode has been sponsored by Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world. So the reason why this is a really good sponsor for today's episode is because it has an entire section of the book focused on developmental psychology. So they use some really interesting questions about how do we apply the developmental psychology theory onto the children, just so it has a practical use. For example, how can we use psychological theories to improve language development? How do we use the theory to create language interventions? And also, how does language work? How effective are these language interventions? And so many more great developmental psychology topics. But also, though, because this is applied psychology, we also focus on a lot of other areas of psychology. For example, how do we apply social psychological theory into conspiracy theories and misinformation? Something that is flat out critical to understand in this day and age. So we look at how can social psychology be used to explain why do people engage in conspiracy theories and misinformation? What are the psychological rewards of spreading misinformation? And most importantly, how does psychological theory explain how to counteract conspiracy theories and misinformation? And we also look at incels, one of the most disturbing psychological topics ever, and I flat out hate the topic. But also, I quite like looking into it because it's so weird, it's so messed up. But thankfully, I have not looked into it for years, for a good year or two, because it's so wrong. It's just no, it's honestly disgusting, but also it's sort of so bad you do want to read about it from an academic point of view, because it's just like, what goes so wrong in these people's lives for them to believe that? And because this is a family-friendly podcast, I hear everyone laughing in the background. um, I'm not going to tell you what incels are. To be honest, do not look it up unless you're on a trusted psychology website, because otherwise you will find some really messed up resources. So yeah, so please do not look that up randomly. It's awful. But then we also will look at the business psychology, and as much as I say I don't like business psychology, that topic is actually really interesting now because we look at in employee well-being, leadership, and to be honest, this book covers so many other areas, including sports psychology. So it's brilliant, it's really easy to understand, it's fun, and I had a lot of fun writing it. So I hope you enjoy it too. So there's applied psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. And you can also get the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence at selected audiobook retailers, including Spotify, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Google Play, as well as some library systems like Biblioteca, Overdrive, and Baker & Taylor. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons, and as always, a massive thank you to my patrons, which your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you wanted to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough for personality. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode, so we're going to be talking about how does birth trauma burden a mother. And also though, before we dive into it, I just want to read a small extract from the introduction I wrote on the blog post. For the vast majority of people, giving birth is a beautiful, wonderful and amazing experience that means that they get to bring new life into the world. Yet for a lot of women, giving birth can be very traumatic, hard and an awful time in their life because childbirth can be overwhelming, as well as mothers can find it overwhelming to immediately transition from childbirth to the early stages of becoming a mother, meaning there is no time for the new mother to recover physically and emotionally after childbirth. Also, whilst women are told it should take about 6 weeks for their recovery to happen, in reality, there is no recovery time because of the new responsibilities and demands of being a new parent. So that's an extract from the introduction. So let's dive into the rest of the episode. Why is childbirth potentially traumatic? When it comes to birth trauma, there are a few main ways that how this can become a traumatic egg experience for new parents. Firstly, childbirth by its very nature disrupts the equilibrium as well as the mother's sense of security and creates a severe disruption that requires rebalancing and recuperation. Secondly, for a lot of women, childbirth can be emotionally traumatic too, because childbirth can involve unexpected interventions, complications, awful interactions with the medical staff, postpartum complications, as well as childbirth is an extremely intense process. All these different factors can leave scars on the mother by disrupting her sense of safety and decreasing her mental health. In addition, what is even worse is that as a society, we don't allow women the time to heal and recover from the emotionally and physically demanding process of childbirth. We simply kick them out of the hospital with a new baby, expect them to immediately take on all these new responsibilities, unless the woman has an amazing social support network and family, then she doesn't get time to recover whatsoever. As well as even if the woman does have a great social support network, because of the weakened state of a paternity leave and other support for new parents, sometimes the partner and other sources of support just cannot be there for the new mother. More on this later on. How does the isolation and pressure of being a new mother impact women? So when I first came across this point, I was very surprised that being a new mother can be isolating, because I didn't understand how. Then I got thinking about how bringing a beautiful new baby into the world brings a lot of challenges that limit a new mother from seeing their friends, going out and doing a lot of things that people normally do to feel socially connected. Moreover, a new mother immediately has to deal with the demands of being a new mother by dealing with breastfeeding, sleepless nights, hormonal imbalances, and the potentially overwhelming responsibility of caring for a newborn baby. And this is where the isolation and pressure part of motherhood comes into play. Because of this new life, the mother egg experience is all unassuming and abrupt. Essentially, your life changes overnight forever, and this leaves very little space for women to address any birth trauma or for them to reflect on their birth egg experiences. Of course, I should note here, I flat out am not saying whatsoever that mothers should not look after their newborns, nor am I saying that mothers shouldn't enjoy the experience of early motherhood. And also, I am not saying mothers shouldn't partake in the responsibilities they now have. I'm not saying that whatsoever. What I am saying is that mothers need and they should ask for the social support if they need it, so they can lessen some of this burden and pressure. This will allow them to process their birth egg experience and any birth trauma too, and getting the social support will help the new mother enjoy the egg experience of early motherhood as well. Additionally, when it comes to isolation in early motherhood, this happens because there is an awful silence around birth trauma. No one wants to talk about it, and in society, there are unrealistic pressures placed on new mothers. For example, in society, there is a big idea that motherhood is only a time for joy, fulfillment, and pure happiness, and if you don't feel those things, then you are a failure as a mother. This is completely wrong, and it ignores the complexities of early motherhood, as well as all the struggles that different women may face. Ultimately, this silent and idealized version of motherhood leads to stigma that makes women feel guilty and ashamed for not immediately embracing the role of early motherhood with gusto, joy, and pure excitement. Also, this stigma only prolongs any birth trauma they've experienced because it makes women scared to speak out and seek the psychological support they need, all because they don't want to be judged and criticised for not living up to this idealised version of motherhood. How can we support new mothers after birth trauma? So, after learning about why birth trauma can burden a new mother, we need to focus on how do we fix this to improve the lives and experiences of new mothers. It goes without saying that the childbirth process, as well as the early stages of motherhood, will always be challenging and tender in their own ways for each woman. Yet, the main problem with the current process is that childbirth doesn't have to be set up unfairly for the women going through childbirth. Since, as a coach and society, we need to create a more supportive environment for new mothers so new mothers can feel understood, heard, nourished, and protected as they recover from the physically and emotionally demanding challenge of childbirth, as well as recover from any birth trauma that they experience. In addition, we need to encourage more honest and open conversations about birth trauma, as well as early motherhood. This would help us to cultivate an authentically supportive environment where women can feel safe to share their birth trauma and other non-idealized experiences without any fear of a judgment. Thankfully, this will help to reduce the feelings of isolation and improve the mental health of new mothers in other ways too. As well as, we need to create conditions for new mothers that allow them to properly heal and steady themselves so that they can prepare for what raising a child will require. Moreover, when it comes to healthcare providers, we need to put pressure on them to develop new approaches, new systems, and new interventions that support a new mother's physical and mental health. This will help to decrease some birth trauma in the first place by decreasing postpartum complications and supporting a new mother's recovery. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what your gender is, if you want children or not, or whatever your thoughts are towards giving birth. We all need to recognise the importance of allowing women enough time and resources to physically and emotionally recover after childbirth to best protect their mental health going forward. Conclusion. So, I already mentioned earlier I had some quite big self-doubt about this podcast episode because I really was questioning whether I should be writing about this in the first place, since I'm not a woman, and whether my future in those children or not is questionable. But I think I did this topic just because I wanted to introduce all of us to the topic of birth trauma. I don't want to sit back and let fear hold me back when there are lots of great women who are struggling with birth trauma and negative birth experiences, and they don't feel like they can come forward because of the stigma. Therefore, that's why I do these sort of unconventional, that I say in air quotes, clinical psychology podcast episodes, because I want to help people. And maybe there's a woman listening to this, and she might feel glad to learn that she isn't the only woman going through this, and there is help and support available to her if she needs it. It's a hope. Anyway, when it comes to transitioning from childbirth to early motherhood, this can be challenging and an overwhelming time for new mothers, and that's okay. It doesn't make a mother a bad person, an unfit mother, or anything negative if she finds it overwhelming and non-idealized. For the rest of us, we need to take steps forward to creating a culture where we're more understanding and empathetic towards women who have had birth trauma and negative birth experiences. We can create this culture by empowering women to navigate this transition with resilience and by supporting women to reclaim their well-being and sense of agency during the transition. Ultimately, the silence around birth trauma has to end, and as kind and aspiring clinical psychologists, we need to help her do this to protect the mental health of women so they feel empowered enough to seek mental health support if they need it. We need to make sure that every woman has the chance to heal and recover with the time and resources they need so they can embark on the great journey of motherhood. A journey that will be challenging, hard, and it will seem flat out impossible at times, especially for mothers who have experienced both birth trauma. Yet, with the right physical and mental health support, motherhood really can be fun, amazing, and one of the most fulfilling egg experiences you'll ever have. So, I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. Like I've said, I did have some self-doubt about this podcast episode, but to be honest, I enjoyed it. This was a lot of fun to research because this is something I never think about. I've never ever thought about birth trauma, about giving birth. I know it's an intense process, but beyond that, I didn't think about it. And I know I'm not the only one. So, and this is what I like about this podcast. It gets me thinking, it gets me learning, it gets me looking at areas I would never ever normally consider, simply because it's not my life experience. But I think that's how we become better people. I think we become better people by learning and empathizing with what other people experience. So even though I will never experience a childbirth, it doesn't mean I shouldn't look into it. It means, to be honest, it means I should look into it just so I understand what women are going through and other people who will give birth. So it's important, and I'm really glad that I did this, and I honestly hope that this helps someone. So if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode and get something out of it, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, definitely check out Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to the real world, available in all the usual places. The AI narrated audiobook also at all the usual places, including Spotify. And if you want to become a patron of the show, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast, or support the podcast on a one-off basis by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Conor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.